Hey SmartPak fans, welcome to a special edition of Ask the Vet. You may notice I'm sitting on this side, not that side. I'm Dr. Lydia Gray, the staff veterinarian and medical director at SmartPak. This is Nerida Richards, PhD. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks Lydia. So I'm Nerida. I'm an equine nutritionist from Australia, which is probably quite obvious given my accent.
I was going to say far.
Yeah.
Obvious, true.
I work as a consulting nutritionist in Australia. I formulate feeds and supplements for companies all over the world. And I also run the feedxl.com website, which is a nutrition calculator that horse owners use to put their horses' diets together.
We love it, yeah. Great. We ask you to submit your horse nutrition questions specifically, and then this segment will answer one of those questions. You'll answer one of those questions. I'm helping. And then to see the other questions, just click on the playlist at the end of the video, and you get to see them all. So, ready?
Okay.
Ready. Miss Callie Rose from Instagram says, when feeding a lot of alfalfa, what is the best way to keep a horse's calcium to phosphorus ratio where it should be? Can we first say what the calcium phosphorus ratio should be?
Yeah.
So we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting, you know, the calcium phosphorus ratio is one of the oldest nutritional concepts that has been around, and still to this day, even with all this amazing research that's happening in the States in pigs with calcium phosphorus, we still don't actually know how calcium affects the absorption of phosphorus. Isn't it amazing?
Someday.
It's amazing. I mean, we know what happens, but we don't actually know the mechanism. So it's a good question, one I'm really familiar with. So the calcium phosphorus ratio for a mature horse needs to be below 6 to 1, so below 6 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus, and above a minimum of 1 to 1.
Okay.
So 1 to 1 is an absolute minimum.
So there should be more calcium than phosphorus.
It should always be more calcium than phosphorus. So if you have more phosphorus than calcium, the phosphorus somehow obstructs the absorption of the calcium, so you become calcium deficient. If you go above the 6 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus, the calcium then starts interfering with phosphorus's absorption.
Okay.
They don't play well together. I mean, they're so important and they go together, but in the gut they just don't play well together. Now for a growing horse, it has to be kept above 1 part calcium to 1 part phosphorus, the same as mature horses, but it needs to be below 3 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus.
So it's a smaller window.
It's a much smaller window,
Okay.
and it's a lot harder when you're feeding a really alfalfa-rich diet. It's a lot harder to keep it within that window. So I guess the easiest solution to this problem, and the one that I would go for first, is feeding less alfalfa.
Okay.
And I'm really familiar with that being quite difficult sometimes because, you know, parts of Australia, it's almost impossible to grow. It's changing, but it was almost impossible to buy any hay other than alfalfa.
And parts of the U.S. are like that
It's
as
the
well.
same.
Yeah.
So it's, if you can, try and find a different hay to kind of bring some of your alfalfa out of the diet, and then that, you know, especially if the horses are boxed, it'll reduce protein intake. You know, horses on pure alfalfa have such wet boxes because they're, you know, urinating a lot. So try and bring in a different hay, a grassy hay of some kind, and that will just naturally bring the calcium intake down, and generally will bring the phosphorus intake up too, because grasses tend to have a little bit more phosphorus.
Right.
Not strictly as a rule, but they tend to have more phosphorus in them. If you can't get away from using that much alfalfa, what you might have to do, depending on whether you feed grain, all the commercial grain mixes that you buy, as nutritionists, we would never put a grain mix on the market that has more phosphorus than calcium.
Right.
You just wouldn't do it. So all of the grain mixes you're going to buy are going to have more calcium.
So adding a
than
grain
phosphorus.
mix alone is not going to bring this back into balance.
It generally won't. Like if your ratio is a long way out, you'll add more phosphorus, but you probably won't add enough because you're adding calcium at the same time to bring the ratio back to where it needs to be. So you can look at using something like rice bran, which is known as being really high in phosphorus and very low in calcium, and can cause calcium-phosphorus ratio problems.
We tell you to be
the other way
careful
around.
at this. Right.
Exactly. But in this situation, it's useful because it adds very little calcium. It adds a lot of phosphorus.
Yeah.
So it's a really useful one for bringing things back down.
What about beet pulp?
Beet pulp is going to push your ratio the other way.
Okay.
So because of the way the sugar is extracted, it's extracted using limestone water. So it actually has limestone of calcium carbonate added to it. So its calcium content's really high. So it's going to make the problem even worse. Grains, so just, you know, feeding straight oats is going to add phosphorus, not as much as rice bran, but it will certainly add a lot more phosphorus than calcium. So again, you know, you might need to look at switching from a like a commercial grain
fortified
mix
grain, yeah.
to an oat grain, and then using just a vitamin mineral supplement. So not a ration balancer, because ration balancers again are almost always formulated with twice the calcium that they have phosphorus. And the other thing you can do is, and it's not ideal again because you're still adding calcium, but you can add something like dicalcium phosphate. So dicalcium phosphate is 22% calcium, but it's 18 to 19% phosphorus. So you're still adding calcium, but it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. So you might be able to pull your ratio back in line with dicalcium phosphate.
But really it comes from if she can get a different kind of hay than alfalfa. That's they're going to be the easiest.
That's And the other thing I would add just on the end of that is guessing all of this is really hard. So I would say use a nutrition calculator. So this is where Feed Excel really comes into its own, in that you can put what you're feeding in and it will show you exactly what the ratio is, and it will show you if you add rice bran, how much rice bran do you need to add to get the ratio back
You can play
to
with
being
it a
balanced.
little bit.
Or if you use rice bran and oats, how much of each do you need to add to stay within calorie requirements, but to balance your calcium phosphorus ratio up.